Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has officially happened. Just a couple days removed from Paul Reed officially being released by the Philadelphia 76ers, he has landed on his feet and out the mud once again, this time with the Detroit Pistons, who are claiming forward center Paul Reed off free agency waivers. Reed is in the second season of the 3-year, $24 million deal, and now B-Ball Paul joins Detroit. So the biggest thing that I want to take here is his contract is continuing to be picked up. That B-Ball Paul is getting his money, which is awesome to see. I was honestly pretty skeptical that this was the case. I think the Sixers viewed it as a situation as maybe if he wants it on a smaller figure, we could bring him back. But to accumulate $7.7 million to Paul Reed at this point in the game is just not the best asset management from a team perspective. But the Detroit Pistons are in a much different spot as an organization, and it does make a lot more sense for them. And to add to the official press release from the team, says the Detroit Pistons announced that the team has claimed forward center Paul Reed off waivers, and they write that the Detroit Pistons announced today that the team has claimed Paul Reed off waivers. Reed, 6'9", 210 pounds, appeared in 82 games with 24 starts for the Philadelphia 76ers last season and averaged 7.3 points, 6.0 rebounds, 1.3 assists, and 1.0 blocked in 19.4 minutes per game. Reed has appeared in 215 games and 28 starts over 4 seasons, all with Philadelphia, averaging 5.1 points, 4.2 rebounds, 0.8 assists, and 0.8 blocks in 13.1 minutes per game. A native of Orlando, Reed was selected by the Sixers with the 58th overall pick in the 2020 NBA draft. He was named G League MVP, NBA G League Rookie of the Year, and All-NBA G League First Team for the Delaware Bluecoats during his rookie year. Prior to the NBA, Reed played 3 seasons for DePaul University and was named second team All-Big East during his junior season, averaging 15.1 points, 10.7 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and 2.6 blocks in 31.7 minutes per game there. So regardless of it not working out at this point in time, we do have to recognize that taking Paul Reed with the 58th overall pick was a slam dunk pick by Daryl Morey and a guy that you did get value out of during his time in Philadelphia. And for the Detroit Pistons, you just officially locked in the best player from the Sixers that officially went there in free agency. As we do know, Paul Reed will be joining Tobias Harris once again over there in Detroit. As far as the Pistons roster as a whole, I did want to touch on that there is Tobias Harris, there is Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, Paul Reed, Cade Cunningham, who I'm still a massive fan of and officially signed his extension, Isaiah Stewart, Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland, Jalen Duren, and Marcus Sasser. So StatMuse asks, how many games will this Pistons squad win next season? Not a lot, unfortunately. But I do think this is a better spot for Paul Reed. And, of course, Tobias Harris is going to be looked at as that veteran leadership. This is a perfect spot for Tobias Harris as well, as his basketball destiny is to take a 28-win team and make them a 31-win team. That's about the ballpark of what Tobias does best. And we do know that it is, the frustrating part about Tobias is he's not talented enough to be a primary option on a winning team, but he's also really bad at the complementary skills that you need from role players. Getting to loose balls, rebounding at a high level, making quick decisions, being athletic and defending the perimeter. None of those are Tobias Harris qualifications there. But I am happy that Paul Reed gets a little familiarity to play alongside it, and I do think this makes sense from the Pistons for financial reasons as well. The Dan Weiner tweets here that this was a no-brainer for Detroit. B-Ball Paul's salary this season is non-guaranteed, so the Pistons can just waive him later this summer if they want to use the cap room elsewhere. So not a guarantee that he sticks, but I do think it makes sense that even though there is a bit of a logjam at the big man position, Paul Reed's still a real deal NBA talent and a guy that is deserving of another chance. Let's not forget about the good times with Paul Reed here in Philadelphia. We remember him blocking Giannis, pointing right at him as the announcer calls him Patrick Reed. I believe it was Reggie Miller there. We remember him outplaying Nikola Jokic while Joel Embiid was out with all that controversy in Denver this year and almost taking this team to a win. We remember the season in which he was an adequate backup center. Unfortunately, it was not this most recent season, but we remember him providing plus minutes at any playoff setting. And I still think it was worth using this experiment for stylistically what he brings to the table. That we're now kind of bringing it back with Andre Drummond, who I'm going to talk about in a second. But with Paul Reed, the selling point was you can never find a guy to replicate Joel Embiid. That for most teams, the backup center is more or less a plug-and-play position. That is not the case for the Sixers when your center is your most important player on both sides of the floor. So for years, the Sixers rolled through the Rolodex of Dwight Howard's, Amir Johnson's, Boban Marjanovic, Greg Monroe's, all these guys that did not work out. And Paul Reed finally was a jolt of athleticism, that he was a different style of player. He wasn't just a worse version of Joel Embiid doing their Joel Embiid impression. It was Paul Reed being Paul Reed. And his outright energy, his outright effort, all did provide some results for this Sixers team. He also was a guy who embraced the Philadelphia community. I've been there for a number of his charity events, talked to him on a ton of occasions. He did the podcast with our guy, RB Philly Take there. So shout out to Paul Reed. He will be remembered in fond memory here. And I will just note that there was a sinking feeling in my stomach that he was going to end up on the New York Knicks. I'm very glad that is not the case, so I can continue to root for B-Ball Paul from afar there. But to touch on the Sixers adjustment, they did make a clear upgrade here. And to start with, I do want to acknowledge B-Ball Paul last season. To dive into his specifics here, 7.3 points per game, 6.0 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1 block last season. Shot 36.8% from 3 and 54% from the field there. Still just 25 years old, plenty of growing to do. But who they did bring back? It was Andre Drummond. And just look at these numbers. I know it's not an eye-for-eye comparison, but produced 8.4 points, 9.0 rebounds, 0.6 blocks per game, shot 55.6% from the field. Drummond is a guy who knows exactly who he is in a way, and that I think Paul Reed is still figuring out that about himself. But Drummond did appear very optimistic and had some strong praise for himself during his initial meeting with the Sixers media. Of course, on his second go-round here, talked about how Philly felt like home, how this is one of the best fan bases that he's ever played in front of. And he also had these quotes here. Quote, I pride myself on my rebounding. I set out from my rookie year to be the best there ever was at it. I still stand on it to this day that I'm the best rebounder to ever play the game. And he also mentioned when asked about the Knicks series below, saying, I think that's why I'm here, to eliminate a lot of those issues, when particularly talking about the rebounding conversation there. Now, this isn't the entire fix to the rebounding issue. I think Drummond, as much as, I wouldn't give him that label, I think you can give credit to a Dennis Rodman or a couple other names around the mix there. But you can make the case that he is the best rebounder, and for what it's particularly worth, he's had his 2 best rebounding seasons by percentage-wise or rebounding percentage the past 2 years since he left Philadelphia. It was in the 100th percentile in both defensive and offensive rebounding percentage last year, which is really absurd stuff there. And Drummond also mentioned about his relationship with Joel Embiid, which is very funny when thinking back to the entire backstory, back when those guys, when Andre Drummond himself was still playing for the Detroit Pistons, how there was this back and forth between him and Joel Embiid. How Joel Embiid would get him in foul trouble every game. Drummond would get really upset about it. They would kind of beef, and it took to the point where back when immature Joel Embiid was taken right to social media and going right at him. That then led to him eventually coming to Philadelphia, that awkward hug that we all saw from Joel Embiid and Andre Drummond, to ultimately these guys becoming friends and really respecting each other. And we had this quote from Media Day as well, which Drummond says, quote, we always stayed in constant communication. That relationship never died. The moment that it was a possibility, meaning to come back to Philadelphia, Joel called me immediately. His excitement was truly the pushing factor in me coming here. And the last thing to note about this specifically is round of applause for just an elite recruiting summer for Joel Embiid. From winking at Paul George on the national stage to calling Andre Drummond, and who knows what else he's doing behind the scenes over there at Team USA. The bottom line is that has been a criticism of mine of Joel Embiid, is he's not been one of these superstars to be forward-facing and go out and actively recruiting players. He absolutely did carry that torch this summer, so shout out to Joel Embiid there. And ultimately, having Andre Drummond as this innings eater type center that you can feel comfortable with, having a guy to start games when Joel Embiid can't, increases the likelihood of him getting through a season healthy in a major way. And Joel seems to be approaching it with that mindset as well. I love the quote that he recently spoke about with Tim Bontemps, speaking about the trio that he has with Joel Embiid, or with Tyrese Maxey and Paul George alongside of him, speaking about how there will be the nights where he can let them have their moments if they got it going, that it isn't as much strain on him. I love this mentality adjustment that is coming in for Joel, not having to be life or death diving into the bleachers on a random Tuesday against the Orlando Magic. Let's save those for the big stages. Let's get a healthy playoff run, and we might be planning a parade down Broad Street. So for the Sixers that have flown the coop and gone to the West Coast, out there in Detroit with Tobias Harris and Paul Reed, best of luck out there. I absolutely am rooting for Paul Reed to ball out and earn himself another deal there. For Tobias Harris, it is good that he's finally getting a fresh start. My final note on Tobias, I'm very critical about him, but the reality is this was a Sixers-inflicted issue, that the bottom line is he was handed a contract that his talent level was never able to stand up to. That he's the highest paid player of all time to never make an All-Star game. With a guy like Klay Thompson, they're in the ballpark of making the save money for their career. And think about the rings on Klay Thompson's finger and how much his skill set as a basketball player translates to winning compared to a guy like Tobias, who's a jack of all trades, master of none. But ultimately, I do hope that he does have some success out there in Detroit. I absolutely will be rooting for Paul Reed out there. So we will see what happens for the rest of the season. But I feel pretty good about the Sixers upgrading and those guys finding their spots in the West Coast out there. So appreciate you guys for tuning into this video now. Much love to Paul Reed for everything that is to come from here. Thank you for not signing with the New York Knicks and forcing me to absolutely hate you, but glad that is not the case. And appreciate all you guys for tuning in once again. Make sure you are smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Dropping a like on this video and any comments you have below. And I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.